How's it going, folks? I hope you all can hear me well. There's no one on the TikTok live right now. Let me promote this on Discord. Hoping we can get some interactions concerning the party. If people want to talk about other stuff, I'm happy to do that as well. But I want to focus on talking to people who are curious about the ACP, who've perhaps been misled to think of it as something that it is not. Let me pause Telegram here. Already have someone requesting. Hey, how's it going?
How you doing, mate?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm alright.
What's up? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I guess could you tell me more about the principles of the American Communist Party, and then who, like, where and who are they are organizing, I guess, currently?
Well, the basic principles, I think, in terms of, it's a Marxist-Leninist organization. The general theoretical framework, we call it Marxism-Leninism Unified Tendency, which means that whatever revolutionary movement in history has been able to succeed in conquering power and proving things for their people, which includes not just the tradition of 20th century communism, but also the tradition of anti-colonial movements, which perhaps were not explicitly communist in character. We draw insights from whatever in the history of people's struggles has worked, while the foundation itself is just basic Marxism-Leninism, the tradition of 20th century communism. What sets it apart from other organizations on the US left is that it's a few things. Well, first of all, the party was formed as an effort of unity with a variety of different groups. The basic base of the party was the cadres of the old and now defunct Communist Party USA. And when it launched, there was a whole host of different organizations that basically came together to create the party. It's the greatest effort at leftist unity that we have seen in modern US history. Central to that unity is a commitment to results. There was a diverse group of different people who thought differently about a whole host of secondary and tertiary issues, but who agreed on class struggle being the basis of what we need to be focusing on, which takes the form, of course, in the national context of struggling for the conquest of political power, for a government that's actually of, by, and for working people, and internationally of dismantling US imperialism. If you're with us on that, the secondary things are things that we can discuss afterwards. United, our basic premise for unity is that we need to focus on results. You can have what seems to be a very good idea, and if it doesn't actually work in practice, if when it is enacted it doesn't breed results, you have to go back to the drawing board. And our party, while it's young, it's a year and some change old, we've been able to experiment on that pragmatist basis. What is it that has worked for us to get recruits, to change the discourse online with politicized factions of the American public, and what is it that hasn't? And we have adjusted ourselves accordingly. We're also in the secretariat of the party. Most of us are very young. We're attuned to how the social media works. And that's central for the modern age of politics, because you have something like the White House, as formal and quote-unquote professional institution as you're going to get. They're posting memes. They're posting like memes with like 2008 Lil Wayne songs on the background. The Democratic Party just a couple of days ago posted an extremely vulgar and outrageous like meme about Donald Trump performing a seemingly homosexual act. So there's this new dynamic that is introduced with the digital age, which requires us rethinking some of the stuff that we just took for granted about professionalism and how is it that we win people over, and argumentation versus reaching people at a more intuitive level of like memes and different types of content. Because we're young, we're attuned to these mediums in ways in which none of the other organizations, I think, are. That's why we have a lot of success with the personalities of the party, which I don't consider myself to be necessarily one. I started my social media stuff very late. I don't like it. I don't like doing videos or anything like that. I'm just a professor and I like writing scholarly articles, but I have to do it. But figures like Jackson and Eddie, who have massive media presences, central to that is the fact that we're attuned to how these medias work, what's effective in terms of reaching people, and that benefits the party because those are eyes that are coming onto the party, and with time, you know, a lot of those people that start as followers and people who are sympathetic, they end up joining. So I don't know if I addressed directly the question, but that's really what I think sets us apart from other organizations on the U.S. left.
Got you. So you guys are just to make sure I understand, it's a split from CP USA, right?
We don't consider it a split. We consider it a reconstitution, because here's what happened with the CPUSA. At the 32nd National Convention, the whole premise of democratic centralism, which is the ability to debate and the majority position win out, was undermined. There was a vote on whether the party should continue tailing the Democrats, and the leadership, which wanted to continue tailing the Democrats, stifled any sort of democratic consultation and debate, and basically enforced its position of tailing the Democrats. And when the membership decided to start a petition to bring back that question, to debate it, and to actually vote on it, because the one vote that existed in the convention, it went in favor of the people that wanted to break from the Democrats. All of those people were purged. And so when an organization violates its own constitutions and its own norms, it basically like commits the S word, it basically dissolves itself, it liquefies itself. And the thing that emerges out of that liquidation of the Communist Party is the ACP. So we don't see it as a split from CPUSA in ways in which other organizations have split from it. We're a reconstitution in the same way that in the Browder era, towards the end of Earl Browder's leadership, he dissolved the party and William Z. Foster reconstituted it anew after a longer time than what took for the ACP to reconstitute what was before the CPUSA.
Got you. And where do you feel you're organizing at now, and how effective have your attempts been so far?
I think on one level, the social media level, which I don't want to undermine. People continue to operate with the split of what is reality and what isn't. I think social media very clearly, it affects people's everyday life to such an extent that it warrants being talked about as if it is reality itself. On social media, we've made a tremendous impact. Our party, when it launched, was basically the most viral thing on Twitter, which is the most politicized platform. We've been at the forefront of fighting the Yahtzees and this whole resurgent Yahtzee movement, standing behind Nick Fuentes. And we're kind of spreading our sphere of influence and our process of questioning the existing state of affairs on social media on that front. As far as the stuff that we're doing on the ground, I think the most unprecedented and important work that we're doing is organizing drayage truckers. It's these truckers that are basically getting screwed as you could possibly get today. And they're at a pressure point of the economy. They're the sort of part of the working class that if they went on strike, they can shut whole regions of the U.S. economy down. We're organizing these people. Part of it is to, some of this stuff is still behind closed doors, but the most public stuff that we're showing is that we're helping to organize them into the Teamsters. So we're working very, very closely with the Teamsters. Our Department of Personnel director, Kyle Perez, meets frequently with Teamster leadership in order to advance these operations, which started in New Jersey and are now expanding nationally. And there's also other very interesting and I think unprecedented plans, which we haven't made extremely public, but that are tied to that drayage truckers movement, which will make it evident to anyone who knows the history of U.S. Socialist politics that what we're doing a year from now, it's going to be evident that it's very unprecedented. Besides that, we also do a lot of community service stuff. are less emphasized than other organizations on just doing the protest form of politics. We often call that activist brain. I think that feels very good for the people involved, but concretely, I don't think it does a big. I don't think it has a big role in changing people's minds, which is what I think the stage of the struggle that we're in is right now. Hold up, there's some idiot in the comment section I want to remove.
It's okay if I ask one more question, like a follow-up to what you were talking about.
So let me see, let me fucking, okay. So part of what we're focused on is doing community service and ingraining ourselves in communities, showing people what communists are all about, because there's still certain myths about what communists are in the US, of course, that predominate. And the only way to show them that that stuff is not true is not through argumentation, maybe for some, but the best way to show them is through our actions, through actually serving them. And we do that by cleaning parks, giving away free clothes, jackets in the winter. We've done that at a national scale, food. We help in community gardens and all that sort of, just basically serve the community so that, when tomorrow comes around and we begin to run candidates locally, which is honestly something we've already done successfully from the beginning of the party. We have an elected official in Orange County, Vermont, the High Bailiff, Christopher Halali. But whenever we start running candidates at a national scale, we've already won these communities over, not through rhetoric and sophism, but through our work.
I'd like to ask on the strategy, organizing them with the Teamsters. I feel like for that particular sector of work, the Teamsters are probably like one of the biggest and strongest unions in that particular field of work. However, how do you feel about the Teamsters sort of apolitical leadership who has no problem appealing to groups like the RNC?
Well, historically, what we have found, at least since the 70s, is that the unions, since the communists were kicked out, became an appendage of the Democratic Party, and they became basically what's called yellow unions.
Due to FDR, right? The New Deal and all that?
Well after. You could make the argument that it starts in 45 when with the Taft-Hartley Act, but it really takes off in the 1970s, where by that time all of the communists and leftists were purged from unions. And if you know what it means to be a communist, central to it is upholding the interests of the working class. So when the communists were in the union movement, it was very strong. It was when they were able to get concessions from the ruling capitalist class. When they were purged, the unions turned into yellow unions, into boss-friendly unions, and they attached themselves to the Democratic Party. And I saw Sean O'Brien's actions speaking at the RNC as the beginning of a break with that. Not an endorsement of the Republican National Convention. He didn't endorse the Republicans. He didn't endorse either party. He just was open to speaking where they let him speak. And he went up there and he told, in front of their faces, he said, the boss's class, the capitalists, have no country. They're not patriotic. They're just doing whatever they can do to make the most profit possible. If you actually watch the speech, yes, he spoke at the convention, and I don't think there's that much of a symbolism there. But if you actually watch the speech, it was one that was extremely radical, at least considering the history of the last 50 years of the labor movement. There's also the fact that a lot of Teamsters are working class people that support MAGA, that support Trump. But the way that we think about MAGA is a little bit interesting, because we think that you can make some sort of a separation between Trump as a symbol of MAGA and like the actual Trump. For us, MAGA represents a form of political partisanship that we haven't seen in a very long time in America. And the goal of I think communists should be to take that energy that has a very rational and progressive kernel, which is in the MAGA working class base, and redirect it away from Trump and towards a socialist politics, which is the only way that we can achieve those things that they like about Trump: attacking the deep state, draining the swamp, ending the forever wars, prioritizing American industry so that we have good paying jobs and we rebuild American infrastructure. So I saw him speaking at the Republican National Convention not as a negative but as a positive, as a break of that major union away from the grip of the Democrats.
Yeah, I can't take this to the. Okay, but you can't I don't know how tall of a task do you think it is to convince people who believe in a man who thinks communism and socialism is the most evil thing ever, right? Because I find the issue is trying to organize workers and people from many different backgrounds that have the same beliefs in the working class. A lot of their beliefs and thoughts aren't really rooted in reality and are more rooted in kind of the quote unquote like culture war, populism bullshit that really doesn't serve anyone's interests. Like they're more focused on certain issues like, oh, the trans and the blue hairs and this and that. And when you try to make it about class, they don't really care to expound much because a lot of the jargon to them just sounds like a bunch of mishmash of bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's people that are like that, certainly in MAGA. I think the more affluent parts of MAGA, but I had the conception that you had before I myself moved towards a predominantly MAGA part of the U.S. Let's see, probably 9 to 10 years ago now when MAGA had first taken off. And what I found is that you have a lot of poor working class people who, when they hear "Make America Great Again," they hear "Make America how it was when my parents or grandparents were able to survive off of one job and have a semblance at least of economic stability." And that capitalism is never going to be able to provide again. And for all of them, I found it infinitely easier than talking to like a middle class liberal to explain to them why Trump is not the best way to realize what they find valuable in MAGA. I often found, and this is in concert with the opinion of our comrades around the country when they speak to a lot of MAGA working class people, that they're not that entrenched in the culture war. You hear them speak and it's very much like the sort of stuff that we Marxists say. This culture war stuff, they're kind of using it to divide us. And now, now there's further splits that have been made because of the second Trump presidency. A large part of the working class part of MAGA has been extremely disillusioned by Trump's relationship to Israel, by the Epstein stuff. He promised to release the list. Of course, he hasn't. And there have been breaks in MAGA that even Trump's son has talked about. And I think those that are still rocking with Trump today, despite everything, those are the ones that are a little bit more cultish, that were a part of MAGA, not because of the more radical values that was tied to it, values that I think are compatible, or they have their essence in a socialist politics and not in Trump. Those people that are still rocking with Trump, they're not the ones that represent, to me, the spirit of MAGA, which was, I think, quite radical. It was also in tandem, I think, to the Bernie movement. The difference is that with Bernie, because he folded everything into the Democratic Party even while losing, the whole base dissipated. But had Bernie's movement sustained itself in the same way that MAGA did, there wouldn't be a need to talk about just MAGA communism. We could talk about a unity of MAGA and whatever the Bernie part of the working class was, whatever slogan would have came up for it. Because in 2016, that was the idea. Both of these are discontented parts of the working class that support these candidates because they see them as political outsiders. And the job of communists should be to tap into those parts of the working class base that are getting politicized and radicalized through these candidates. The problem is that with Bernie, the base just fell apart. Bernie, didn't have the same capacity that, for whatever reason, Trump did to sustain the base that got him elected the first time.
Could you elaborate on like what MAGA communism is?
Yeah, MAGA communism is a meme, right? A meme that was developed by Haz al-Din, who's the chairman of the Communist Party now, was developed 3-4 years before the launching of the party. Its purpose was virality, to get people to rethink some of the assumptions that they had, both people on the left, but people in general. And it accomplished that. There was a tremendous reach that the idea was able to get, both in the form of Jackson Hinkle interviews, or Haas interviews, and that caused a lot of people to rethink certain things. Now, the essence of MAGA communism was just communism, right? In a certain sense, the MAGA communism unity, from a purely theoretical standpoint, was superfluous. It was primarily for its meme value, its practical or tactical import in getting people to get the wheels of thought going. Because it's just communism for what reason? Because if we see MAGA as a popular working class phenomenon that's taken a partisanship character, what we mean by that is a very specific term in political theory. It means that a group of people, and in this case a part of the working class, has taken itself up into a relationship that's politically antagonistic, not just with one pole of dominant hegemonic politics, but with the whole spectrum and horizon of hegemonic politics as a whole. Remember that the MAGA movement was people that not just disagreed with the Democrats, but also with the Republicans. There was even speculation at the beginning of creating an alternative party for MAGA. So that base, if you're Mao or Lenin or Marx looking at the situation of the American working class, it'd be foolish not to try to somehow appeal to that base of the working class that's organizing itself, that has this spontaneous and embryonic class consciousness, and that is already making demands that are only capable of being realized under a socialist banner, not under Trump. So there's this nice little slogan that Haas comes up with, which is that we're here for the burger, not the clown, right? At McDonald's, you go in and no one goes into McDonald's asking, for Ronald McDonald and not asking for a burger. People go in to ask for a burger and not the clown. And that's the same thing with MAGA. We're there to try to win over the working class, not because of Trump. We don't support Trump. The party and all of the influencers and institutions that are sort of tangential to the party, like the Institute that I founded with Eddie and Infrared, we all called for people to not vote in the election. We didn't call for people to vote for Trump. We did not promote Trump. MAGA communism had really nothing to do with Trump. As much as McDonald's has to do with the clown, right?
All right, thank you. I think I'll leave it there. I would say I think we're gonna have a tall task, specifically trying to bring in people who have backwards ideas. But hopefully, we can get workers united in their own interests, I guess. But yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you for your questions, man. Take care. All right, that was good. There was someone else that wanted to come up and speak. Hopefully we can keep this specific. Yo, what's up, Harold? How's it going, brother? Hope all is good. Harold is one of our chapter executives over in Florida. Very badass dude. Hopefully we can get some people that have similar doubts. That individual sounded like he might have been British or something, so maybe we can get someone from the US, a leftist, or someone who has wrong ideas based on rumors about the ACP. Did Mao exclude the Han Chinese from the revolution? Yeah, that's of course. Of course he didn't, yeah, but thank you for your hard work. Thank you, Sierra. Is this life safe for us, Aurelius? I don't know. You're free to speak your mind. It was stolen from him by the DNC. I'm guessing you're referring to Bernie. Yeah. That's part of what Edward Snowden showed. Do you think Putin will give Assad to Jalani? I don't think so. Oh my God. Putin requested to join. Mr. President, I didn't even know you were allowed on this app. How are you doing?
Hello, hello.
What's up? What do you want to ask?
Oh, what do you think about the Russia and Ukraine war?
Um, I think that it's a manifestation of the global class struggle. I think U.S. imperialism is waging a proxy war against Russia and has for a very long time. It's been encroaching on Russia's borders ever since the fall or the overthrow of the Soviet Union when it promised it wouldn't. And Ukraine is a very clear red line because it's been historically through Ukraine that is, plain in terms of its topography and quite close to Moscow. It's been historically through Ukraine that Russia has been invaded, whether it's Napoleon or the Mustache Man in the Second World War. So it's clear that there's security concerns. You also had since 2014 and the US-backed coup of the democratically elected Ukrainian government that would have been more pro-peace. You've had a massacre of the Donbass population, which is primarily ethnically Russian. You had various apartheid-like policies. You had nearly 15,000 people in the Donbass that were massacred. And right before the start of the SMO, it was looking like, the war against the people of the Donbass, almost genocidal in character, was going to intensify. And it's a very scary regime that we have, very fascistic in Ukraine. They have, and this comes from my conversations with Ukrainian comrades that we have in the party. They have completely manipulated Ukrainian history. It's a history that integral to it is the upholding of Yahtzee forces, Banderite figures, the Banderite movement, an extremely right-wing nationalist fascistic movement, and the demonization integral to that of the Russian people, who are, after all, a brotherly people to the Ukrainians that lived fraternally during the Soviet time. So I consider the SMO to be an act of anti-imperialist resistance to help the people of the Donbass to fight against a proxy that the US and NATO is using to attack Russia. So there's national security concerns, the concerns of the people in the Donbass, and it's a justified war. It's one of those cases that's a justified war precisely because I consider imperialism to be a global manifestation of the class struggle, and Russia fighting back against imperialism in a certain level is no different than workers fighting back against their bosses on the shop floor.
Right. Just a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's been some news that Ukraine's going to get some tomahawks soon from the U.S. What do you think about that? Do you think that's going to help them win the war, take back land, or what's your opinion on the outcome of this war? Do you think he's going to win?
I mean, I obviously think Russia has the upper hand. The problem has been that since the start of the SMO, every other Tuesday, someone who shares my interpretation of the war stands up and says, by summer, Ukraine is going to be done and the war is going to be over. I myself was one of those people, and at some point, us standing here in the big 2-5 in the middle of October, I don't want to speculate about that anymore, because it seems at one moment that the end of the war and Ukraine basically quitting is around the corner, and then something happens that that prevents that. So I think in general, not only is Russia going to win and end up having significant parts of what was previously Ukrainian territory, but to a certain extent it's already won because of the way in which global finance capital attacked Russia after the special military operation. Countries around the world were like, wow, to what extent can we continue to trust the global dominance of the US dollar and their financial institutions when they could do something as easy as freeze everything and try to destroy our countries and hit us with a flurry of sanctions and blockades and yada yada yada. So Russia, instead of being economically hurt by all that, it became stronger it also sent a signal to countries across the global south of the true nature of U.S. imperialism and NATO and these global financial institutions, and that if they're even a little bit smart, they'll try to move away from the system of dollar hegemony. And we've seen really the intensification of this new ideologically and even politically heterogeneous movement of BRICS. It's really, really developed ever since the special military operation and the reaction that the West had to that justified war that Russia's carrying on.
Oh, okay. And just the last question. Yeah, my friend Tanas, he wants to be on the panel. His name is lockdown.net.
What was that?
Lockdown.net.
Okay. Yeah, I'll let him in.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Yep, thank you. All right, how's it going?
Going good. What's the subject? I just joined.
Before I was speaking with President Putin about Russia, the point of the live is to try to get people who have misunderstandings about the ACP, to try to talk to them and clear up some of the rumors that are at the foundation of how they judge our party.
Yeah. Well, my friend Putin there, I kind of introduced him to your channel, I think. But yeah, I defend the ACP a lot. I assume, do you allow people to defend the ACP on stage? Because I see some people that are in the ACP allow it, and some people are like, they more want to focus on people who are in the ACP, so I just want to make sure.
What was the last part you asked?
Oh, is it allowed for people who defend the ACP to go on stage? Because usually I've seen people like that.
Yeah. I know Haas usually doesn't let people who support the ACP to come on. I mean, it's fine. There's someone else on the waiting list, so if you have a question or something you want to ask me, you can go ahead, and then maybe I can switch to the other person and see if they're an ACP hater that can have their minds changed. But do you have a question?
Yeah, I did have a question. So, what is your opinion on the ceasefire deal going on in Gaza?
I don't think it's going to last. Sadly, we've seen a few of these pop up in the last 2 years. They don't last. Israel breaks them to a certain extent. It's already broken it with certain actions it's committed. And it doesn't really address, I think, the fundamental core of the problem, which is the Zionist project as an imperial, colonial project that is occupying Palestinian land and treating the Arab population under conditions of apartheid, and that has been carrying out a genocide. It's completely decimated Gaza. It's, well, a ceasefire, but what's left of Gaza, and just some weeks ago, the level of hunger was so bad that even the people who were able to survive by getting a little bit of food, they were going to have lifelong medical issues because of the level of hunger and starvation that they were allowed to get to. So ceasefire, it's positive because I have friends right now in Gaza that it's better to not have constant bombs flying over your head and constantly seeing dismembered babies, because a lot of them work in hospitals. But it doesn't address the fundamental question of how it is that a genocide was allowed to occur for 2 years, how nothing happened. The international community, condemnations, and the ICC and everything, but nothing happens, because at the end of the day, international law is this paper that the US wipes its ass with. And then these idiots and infantile brained people come around and say, oh, look at this shit paper, I'm going to appeal to its authority. At the end of the day, it's just power, and the fear that countries, with the exception of Yemen and the Lebanese resistance and even the Palestinian resistance, and to a lesser extent the Iranian resistance, the courage that they had to actually confront the Zionist entity and the only language that it understands. Everyone else was in different ways fearful of the economic, political, various forms of power that the U.S. and Israel exert globally. Too scared to do anything concrete. A lot of nice words from a lot of presidents and statesmen, but not a lot of concrete actions. So that condition is still there. Nothing has changed with regards to that. So, I mean, it's good. My friends don't have bombs flying over their heads for now, but there's no guarantee that anything is going to be long-lasting, that any actual justice or Nuremberg-style trials are going to be occurring anytime soon.
Yeah, 100% agree. I'm already kind of worried about the state of the ceasefire because it's already been violated a few times by the IDF.
Yep.
Yeah, they shot, what was it, 6 civilians for allegedly crossing a line, which is BS. We all know that.
Right. It's very sad, but the Israeli population is as propagandized and sanguine a population as you can possibly get. There's reports that Norman Finkelstein often cite, but around half of the population is perfectly fine with explicitly stating that they're okay with, with the Palestinian people just being completely exterminated. And it's so sad, and it's one of those diabolical moments that proves the dialectical law of the transition of things into their opposite, because the Jewish people have been historically an incredibly persecuted group of individuals. Out of the Jewish people's plight, very heroic struggles have arisen historically. They've been, in a certain sense, they were at the forefront of the birth of the modern socialist movement. Most of the most important thinkers were of Jewish descent. A lot of the cadres and the leadership of these parties were of Jewish descent. And I don't mean this in a sort of bullshit Nazi Judeo-Bolshevik thing, but it was a persecuted people that was at the front lines of the struggles for justice, of the class struggle. And for a people to go from that to being convinced, to being brainwashed so thoroughly by Zionism, which is perhaps the most anti-Semitic force on the planet right now, it's very sad to see. It's one of those despicable forms in which the transition into its opposite takes, where, again, heroic struggle turned into quite literally that which they spent millenniums fighting against.
Yeah. Like in the West, I've noticed there's a huge problem with Zionism being promoted. Like, I'm a Christian, and I see a lot of Christians promoting Zionism, but I read that the Israeli government fined the church, I forgot the name of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, $2.3 million for water for the past 2,000 years. Like, the Israeli government is doing a lot of overreach, and then on these Christians as well. It's like a lot of Christians in the West, they think that Israel treats all religions equally. It's not true.
No.
It's quite the contrary, and people are always like, "Oh,
it's a Jewish supremacist state."
It's all these APAC people, like funding like Christian organizations to become pro-Israel, or whatever. Like Greg Locke, Pastor Greg Locke, or whatever. It's a huge problem in the West where people are brainwashed by it, and and even in Israel, like people literally moved to Israel because they support it so much. Like what's the word? People non-Jewish descent will move there, and they'll they'll kind of realize, oh, this isn't how it is. I mean, Jewish people are really great people. I mean, as you said, they're very revolutionary people, great revolutionary history. A lot of people in the West are kind of blind to how governments corrupt religion, as you see in Israel, and how they oppress people. Like now they're trying to bulldoze Al-Aqsa, I've heard. Mm-hmm. And it's just a horrible thing, man. The whole thing in Israel is a big tragedy.
It's very sad, and I have a ton of Jewish friends. Some of my best friends are Jewish, and the fact that these actions are done in their name is, again, the greatest force of anti-Semitism in the world, because not everyone has the ability to be careful in their analysis and not confuse the actions of Israel as a nationalist, colonial, imperialist project and Zionism as a nationalist ideology that was developed by people that, sure, they were Jewish, but they accepted the fundamental premises of the most anti-Semitic parts of Europe. The way that they spoke about the Jewish people was in many ways indistinguishable from the anti-Semites in Germany, etc. That's why at the beginning of the Yahtzee project, there was intense collaboration with the Zionists and the Yahtzees, because they both wanted to get the Jewish people out of Europe. So it's truly sad how what's happened to that people in the U.S. Some of the papers that the Communist Party, the old Communist Party, used to run, they were ran by Jewish. A lot of them were in Yiddish. One of the most important theorists of the Communist Party USA, Moshe Olgin, was a Jewish comrade from Russia whose family had faced persecution and the pogroms. And at some point, that scene of Jewish radicalism, especially in the East Coast, it just gets brainwashed into Zionism, and it's very sad.
Yeah. Yeah, like Israel, the whole thing that Israel is doing is making people, like in the West, think that all Jewish people are bad, and it's like the Israeli government is harming their own people. Again, yeah, it says the highest form of anti-Semitism that's out there. Like, you'll go out and ask, like, you know, the Groypers, for example, they'll be like, oh, the Jews are the problem. But what they're really meaning behind that is Israel's the problem. It's not Jewish people that's the problem. It's not Jewish people doing this. They're a great, like, a lot of Jewish people are actually really nice and very great people, you know? Like, a lot of them are anti-Zionists, especially in the U.S.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of what has the Zionist entity and its employees, basically, in the U.S. That's what has them stressed out, that a lot of young Jewish people in the U.S. are turning away from Zionism. They're seeing it for what it is. And that's very dangerous for a project that sustains itself on the basis of people being, on the basis of people operating with an understanding of the world that's literally topsy-turvy. Because they still, till this day, consider themselves the victims. And it's a turning of the world on its head. And a lot of people are seeing it. Younger Jewish people are seeing it in the U.S. And, you know, that's why you have these censorship campaigns and Larry Ellison buying TikTok. And they're going to make sure that the apps in which people are getting the datums of information that allow them to undergo those transformations, they're going to make sure that in the near future that's not possible anymore. But do you have any other questions, brother? Because I had here a guest. I wonder if they're still on there.
I don't got any more questions.
Thank you so much for coming on then. And thank you for continuously supporting the ACP. See ya.
Thank you.
All right. 21st League. How's it going, man?
Good. So I'm not on here to criticize the party, but I have some questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So I know your position in the party, but what role do you play?
I'm the Secretary of Education. The party structured with an executive board, which is the top 7 leaders of the party. I am amongst those, and the department that I run is the Department of Education. Below that, we have a Politburo with deputies of the EB. So that's basically the position that I occupy in the party. Requires me to oversee the publication of the party's journal, which is monthly. It's an extremely intense amount of work on that front, pumping out 100 pages of articles every month from different authors. I oversee cadre education. So we have periodical reading lists, quizzes that are made for them, exams that they have to take, and there's multiple lists for multiple different moments in which people are at in their trajectory. I also oversee the Student League, which are all the efforts that we're doing on campus. And as a party employee and someone who's active on media, I also do a ton of work for the party's media team, which is it's directed by Eddie Liger-Smith, my brother, who we founded Midwestern Marx with. But I also do a ton of work in media, and a lot of the recent videos that the party's been cranking out, I've been kind of spearheading the effort of voiceovers and all that stuff. Is that what you're asking about?
In the position right now.
What was that?
How did you get in the position that you are in now?
We came together, these different forces, to found the party, and the preliminary, I forget the plenary committee that officially founded the party was the one that democratically ended up deciding who's in what position.
So is the ACP just a different name for Communist Party USA?
It's not just a different name, it's a reconstitution of the entity. We see the CPUSA as a defunct entity at this point because of things that I enumerated earlier in terms of violating their own constitution and liquidating themselves. So the ACP is a reconstitution, carrying on the legacy of the CPUSA. That's the tradition in the US that we see ourselves in light of.
So, yes, what party?
I didn't hear what you said.
You're a split?
No, we're not a split.
So you're a split party?
We're a reconstitution, which is a different thing from a split. A split is when a faction of the party is dissatisfied and breaks with it. A reconstitution is when a party liquidates itself because it violates its own constitution. And on that basis, it gets reconstituted. There's a precedent for this when Earl Browder liquidated the party in the aftermath of the Second World War. William Z. Foster, sometime after, came in and reconstituted it. So the same thing that William Z. Foster did in the aftermath of that unconstitutional liquidation of the party is what we did in 2024.
So were you a part of the founding of ACP, or what did you join?
I was a part of the founding.
So a comment on what the last person said. So he was talking about how hating on the Israeli state shouldn't be meaning that you shouldn't be hating on the Jewish race as a whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you shouldn't be associating the Israeli genocide with the Jewish race as a whole, because the Zionist government is different than the Jewish race, and that their genocide of the Palestinian people has nothing to do with the Jewish race as a whole.
I don't disagree with that. What we dislike is Zionism, not Judaism. And we see Zionism as one of the greatest anti-Jewish forces on the planet.
And Israel is just another colonistic state of native Palestinian land.
Yes, it's a colonial imperialist project. It's a colonial outpost of the U.S. in the Middle East or West Asia.
Well, that was what I was having to say. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Bye-bye. All right, that's good. Anyone else? Guys, if you're ACP or if you're a follower, a consistent follower of ours, please do make sure to boost this stream in any way possible. I think by spamming the like button or sharing the stream. that should allow people to view it. Hopefully we can get haters of the ACP on here to discuss their qualms. So let's see what's going on in the comment section in case it takes long for anyone to come in. Our party is old. Its origins go back to 1919, but the origins of the reconstitution are in 2024. All right, Damien Hoffman. Hey, how's it going?
Hi. Can you listen to me?
What was that?
Can you listen to me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Have you read this book called Orientalismo?
Edward Said?
Yeah.
I read it at the beginning of my undergraduate studies many years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also reading right now, actually, for my undergrad studies of art history.
Okay. Do you have any questions you want to ask me specifically besides the book?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the ACP. Like, it's called the Communist American Party.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to talk to you about the name because I feel it's kind of like, you know, trying to say that America is also USA or Canada.
Yeah, I get where you're going. This is a very frequent question. I'm guessing you're Latin American?
Yeah, I'm from Mexico.
Okay,
But
okay,
my
good.
father's from Germany.
From Germany?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Here's the thing. We do understand America is the hemisphere, North and South America, the two continents. In many ways, we do have a civilizational vision of America as a new world, with some bonds to Europe, but also with bonds to Africa and to the indigenous people that lived here. However, we use America when we're referring to a party that operates in the United States and in Canada because of the fact that in Spanish you have a word for someone that's from the United States. You know what that word is? Estadounidense.
Mm-hmm.
In English, we do not have that word. The people of the U.S., they don't call themselves United Statesian, they call themselves American. And that might be wrong. That might be something that when we get socialism, we can begin to correct. But as a communist party, as an entity that has been deemed by McCarthyism as foreign and un-American for the people of the U.S., it would be foolish and ultra-leftist and formalist for us, on the basis of understanding that America is the whole continent, to call our people the United Statesian instead of what they are or what they call themselves, which is the American people. So that's why we call it the American Communist Party. Also because not only is the party that we were a reconstitution of, the Communist Party USA, but we also have this understanding of the trajectory of the USA itself as a state that itself is in an impending, up-and-coming constitutional crisis. We do consider that on the horizon, something like a civil war is not impossible to conceive of. Not a civil war provoked by us dirty communists or anything like that, but something that emerges from the organic development of American capitalism and its, perhaps development is not the best word, degeneration of American capitalism. And these are ideas that have been conceived of by Haas, our chairman, for a very long time, that I've also been a part of how others in the party, including myself, have thought about the American trajectory. And even that term, United States of America, I think how the current state exists is bound to change after that constitutional crisis and civil war. So why attach ourselves to something to a name that's on the way out.
So let's imagine, for example, that the ACP gets in power. You would, how you would change the United States?
How you would say, like what, in terms of policy, or in
Yeah.
terms of the name?
Well, in terms of policy, name, maybe relationships between USA, Canada, USA, Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
other countries, whatever.
Well, we consider Canada to be the part of the American Revolution of 1776 that was unfinished. It's a part of that revolutionary process that was not able to win and that sustained itself under a condition of domination by the British Crown. And so naturally any revolutionary struggle in the US for us would have to include that part of the US revolutionary struggle which wasn't able to win. It would be absurd, for instance, for us to win power in the US and start establishing socialism and just leave Canada, which in terms of how they are as a people are indistinguishable basically from Americans. Let a Canadian go to Europe and you'll see that people are just going to think they're American, right? There's literally no difference. Culturally, there's no difference, right? They're like, I hate to say this for my Canadian brothers and sisters, but they're almost like embarrassed. Yeah, they're like embarrassed Americans to a certain extent.
I live in Canada.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, you know how similar the culture and everything is from the U. Many people feel themselves American. That's the sentiment that we're getting from our members that are in Canada right now. When it comes to Mexico, I think it's completely different. Mexico has its own sovereign traditions of struggles. It's defined itself as a nation through those struggles. And for us, what defines something is that struggle. So by the very fact that Canada really had no success in their... If Canada would have had a nice sovereign tradition, if it would have broken off from the U.S. and lost its bonds, maybe that's a different animal. But it still exists as a part of the American Revolution. What happened there? Son of a bitch. That's weird. What the hell's going on? All right, I was getting a phone call through Telegram. Give me a second.
Take your time.
Oh, streaming. The fuck happened? Getting my phone blown up. So yeah, Mexico has a sovereign tradition, so therefore it's it makes no sense considering it a part of the same revolutionary process as America, in the way in which we would consider Canada to be that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But for example, what do you like? You plan for the Mexican people who live, especially in the south of the USA?
That's a very interesting and complex question, right? Because since the American conquest of those formerly Mexican lands, you've had this interesting predicament where a lot of those people, and I myself am someone who lives in that part of America that used to be Mexico, a lot of those people consider themselves to be American, but the ones that have Mexican heritage, they also have this very special relationship with Mexico, where it's almost as if they have two homelands. They have Mexico and they have the U.S. In the same way that for me as a Cuban American, I feel Cuban and I feel American, although I know you don't like that usage of the word. So I think there's going to have to develop a very comprehensive and, of course, non-imperialist, like central to the program is destroying American imperialism, but a very a relationship with Mexico that's sensitive to the fact and attuned to the fact that there is that part of what's right now the US, which was Mexico, and there's a tremendous cultural overlap. There's bonds of association that the people there have with people that are still in Mexico, family members, and all of that has to be taken into account. You want to, I'm going to say the most idealist thing I can say, but I'm not embarrassed to say it. Part of our civilizational understanding is, well, in the immediate sense, yes, Canada is a part of the US, and that's the immediate civilization that we're operating within. But once American imperialism is destroyed, could not this part of the Americas be considered as a component of the Pan-American vision of Martí or of Bolivar or of San Martin? You know, there's this mural that you have in one of the most important governmental buildings in Mexico, where it's both Americas, and in each America you have essential figures, Lincoln and Martí and Bolivar. Is that not, if we let our utopian hats be put on our heads, is that not what the future socialism of the Western Hemisphere could look like? A Pan-Americanism, a Pan-American civilizational bloc with national forms of sovereignty, just like, you know, China has a civilization, but also nations within it. It's a civilizational states with nations within it. Wouldn't something like that be possible once U.S. imperialism is completely smashed? Because if we consider what are the constitutive parts of what makes a North American, Europe, except it's the Anglo part of Europe, but Europe nonetheless, Africa and indigenous, and also the mixture of Hispanics that have came into the northern parts of the Americas. But if we look at the southern and central and Caribbean parts of the Americas, it's the same thing. It's Europe, it's Iberian Europe, Spain and Portugal, it's Africa, West Africa, the same part of Africa, and it's indigenous people. So in the same way that we can consider the south part a new type of people, because they have the same components that make them up, I think if we really analyze what are the components that make up the newness of the North American civilization, it's the same as the South ones. So at what point should the distinction itself begin to be brought down? Well, I think a precondition to that would be like a socialist North America that's not imperialist, so that North America is not considered the giant of the 7 leagues, as Jose Marti called it, but a part of the Pan-American vision, so that there's no longer a distinction between Nuestra América y la América de ellos, between ours and the other America, but we can think about it as one revolutionary American hemispheric civilizational project.
Here's the thing. I like the idea, but like you said before, it's too utopian. This sounds kind of maybe negative from my side, but I cannot imagine that future as a United States existed.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree. That's why I said I'm putting my utopian, very long-term hat on. And I'll tell you how I came to this. I'm first and foremost a philosopher, and one of the people that was very important for me early on was Enrique Dussel, an Argentine-Mexican philosopher. And one of the things that he problematizes is the fact that in Latin America you have a crisis of identity, an identity crisis, because the schooling, everything that has been imposed on how it should think about itself has come from outside, from Europe, and it needs to really develop means through which it achieves not only economic and political sovereignty, but also a sovereignty at the level of how it comes to think about itself and its history, its identity, its unique civilization. And what's interesting is that, therefore, one of the things that defines that Latin American experience is a certain indeterminateness, a certain openness, a horizon of possibilities in which it can determine itself in. When we think about North America, the same problem arises. It's hard for people to think, well, really, what is the meat and potatoes of the North American civilizational project? In some ways, it's had more sovereignty to define itself than in Latin America and in South America. But nonetheless, there's still a level of indeterminacy, of embryonicness to the civilizational project that, there's this operation that Hegel makes at the beginning of the Science of Logic, where he's analyzing the category of pure being. And if it's a category that is indeterminate to such a pure extent, at some point it becomes indistinguishable from nothing. And it requires a renewed understanding, a new category that's more refined and more concrete. Then you have becoming and determinate being, yada, yada, yada. When you look at how the question of identity is brought up on these two Americas, they're both in a certain sense defined by that indeterminacy that Enrique Dussel talked about. The same indeterminacy that you have in Latin America, you also have in the northern part. So at what point do we realize, well, if both are defined positively through a certain lack, at what time when do we begin to realize that maybe when it comes to this grander civilizational world historic scheme, maybe it's the same project, except it's got, these embryonic loopholes of one part being an empire that oppresses the other. But the Americas, back in the day when colonization began, it used to just be called the New World. Both the North and the South was called the New World. And that's true. I think there's truth in that. It's a new world, not in the sense that they meant it, because it was just because it was new to the Europeans. It wasn't new to the indigenous, right? But it's a new world in the sense that it becomes a new synthesis of humanity. A new people arise out of it that are defined by this combination of European, African, and indigenous.
I like that word of seeing. I would kind of distinct myself from Enrique Dussel. He's a very intelligent person. He died also a few years ago.
I was supposed to meet him right before he died. I was in Mexico giving a conference at the National Autonomous University of Mexico in Mexico City. Wow. And I had the opportunity to go to one of his classes to meet him. And the person that was guiding me said, well, I mean, we're good friends with him and we're going to have you back a bunch of times. And it's true. I've gone back to Mexico a bunch of times. So I decided, well, let's go out to drink and party after the conference instead of going out to meet Dussel. It kind of pressured me into it. And, what do you know? The weekend that I come back to the States, he dies. So.
Shit. Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, it was tough. I also, there was another person in that sphere. Man, it's been so long since I've thought about him that the name's not even coming to my head, but it was a Bolivian Marxist that was also a professor at UNAM. Very, very good friends of Dussel. And he had also died some years prior. Juan something, I forget his name. The name's not coming to me. But
yeah, I was gonna say the reason I think Latin America has a crisis is because they have a part of the identity of they don't know what to choose. They have they don't know what to choose their identity of indigenous or of Mexico, like the Aztecas, the Mayas, or in Peru, the Incas, or they don't know what to choose the identity of this Hispanic. And the problem with that also is that Hispanic and USA and more concretely the English Empire. That's basically where USA comes from, because Mexico comes from the Spanish Empire and the Azteca Empire. They've always been enemies, and I don't see that working in the future, because I think, in my opinion, the Hispanic citizen and the Anglo-Anglophone, I don't know how to call it, that should go different, the civilization.
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Because the European component that's added to the mix of this new stuff is one that's not the same. In one case, you have the Spanish or Iberian influence, and in another, you have the Anglo. And there's contradictions between those, right? I think that one of the things that's interesting, and it happens in both cases, the way that the beginning of a revolutionary project of sovereignty is sought is by breaking with those traditions that come from Europe. In America, or sorry for using it in this way, in the US, there's from the beginning a very staunch sentiment that what's going on in the US is something new that cannot be subjected to the control of Europe. And this attitude that it's a new world and a new civilizational project, it was very important for the founding fathers to make explicit. The same thing happens with the Latin American revolutionaries. In all of the struggles for sovereignty, in both cases you had peoples who had to wage revolutionary struggles for sovereignty against European forces of domination on those projects. The influence that those forces that they fought against, that influence of course stays. There's never a full clean break, and those influences that remain are different. They certainly are. But I think that by the very nature of the struggle for sovereignty being one of a break with the old world, there's a lot more in common there in terms of culture than there is. I mean, you have to a certain extent the language barrier, right? But
Yeah, exactly.
something so central to Latin American identity is how it sees its past in light of these struggles. In Venezuela, of course, Bolivar and all of those revolutionaries. But what's central to the identity of people in the United States? The founding fathers, the Bolivars of the North. You know, there's a difference there in language, but if you get, I think, to the meat and potatoes, and you develop mechanisms of translating what's being said, there's a lot of similarities in terms of the culture. It's hard to imagine that the life world, the being in the world, the Dasein, if you wish to put it in Heideggerian terms, of an indigenous person in South America is so radically different from a rural farmer in the US. Is it that different? I'm not sure it is. I had this interesting conversation with a Peruvian comrade who was a part of the Perú Libre party, worked with the Castillo campaign, and there was something very homologous in the fact that Castillo was getting attacked by the metropolitan Peruvian left, the Juntos por Perú, Verónica Mendoza, and the more cosmopolitan center left that was located in Lima. They were attacking Pedro Castillo as backwards, and the rural base that he had as rooting their struggle and resentment. That's identical to how the parts of the MAGA base in the flyover states are treated. They're treated as backward rednecks, as just backward people, right? And in that moment, talking to him, I was like, oh yeah, that's these MAGA workers, socially conservative and whatnot, they are to us what that indigenous rural base was for Castillo. And I think that once you get past the language barrier, there's infinitely more in common in terms of their being in the world than there is different. And you have language barriers in South America as well. There's a bunch of indigenous languages that still survive in some regions and that are predominant. There's fucking Brazil, right? Which is Portuguese. There's Grenada, which speaks English. So it's messy. It's not clean. But I think it defines itself through that break with the old world.
Okay. That's very interesting.
But anyways, brother, thank you for the questions. Do you have anything else?
No, that's right.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining, man. It was great talking to you. Take care.
And buenas noches.
Buenas noches. All right. Let me check my phone real quick because shit's been fucking popping off. All right, yeah, I have important party business to attend to. So, sorry I couldn't make this longer. Make sure to follow the account if you want to help me financially and throw a few dollars my way so that I can buy books or something like that. You can do that by subscribing to my Substack, that Philosophy in Crisis. Probably going to be announcing a new institute class pretty soon, a new seminar, so look out for that. And yeah, join the ACP if you haven't already. I couldn't emphasize how important this is. If you disagree with the current state of affairs, if you want an actual government of, by, and for the people and to smash U.S. imperialism, join the party. It's still early. Put yourself in a position where you can flex on your grandchildren by telling them you were part of the first few members of this communist party that's going to radically change the trajectory of this great country. Yes, all of the live streams are afterwards posted on the Midwestern Marx YouTube. So just look up Midwestern Marx YouTube. I post the live streams on there. So, all right. Thank you all who watched, and we'll see you next time. Have a good night.